How's it going, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Dyson Sphere Program. Hope you guys have been enjoying this series so far. If you guys have, you guys know what to do. Smash the like button. If you haven't already, consider subscribing. It really does help out the channel. And other than that, let's get right into it. So, at the end of last episode, we kind of left off on interesting note, I would say. We realized that we're going to need more / better deuterium production. Now, there's a couple ways we can do it. Number one is we can continue to refactor. The other option, which in retrospect, or I guess hindsight, we take the hydrogen and we convert it into deuterium directly. So whereas refactorization requires like a chance to happen, the other method is a guaranteed way of producing it. So through your guys' comments, we're gonna stick with refactorization, even though it's gonna use a lot more fucking machines. I figure, you know what, let's try it. We'll see how it works. So we have to figure out how can we make the build we currently have smaller, number one, and or more efficient. Now there's two or I guess three ways we could do it. So we could try to take up some of the dead space. We could try to make sure that every single node of hydrogen that passes through one of those machines is in fact a stack of 4. And we also want to make sure that the hydrogen is constantly moving, because that is key. If the hydrogen isn't moving, it's not actually producing anything, right? And that is one flaw with the current design that I have noticed, is it tends to stop. It tends to just not want to keep moving unless hydrogen gets consumed later down the line. So there is a bit of an issue with the system just stopping. And so we have to figure out, okay, so we know the problem. Well, actually, rather, we know the overall problem. And thanks to that, we have since discovered / observed several sub-problems that we need to address. Number one being, how can we get more machines in the same area, right? How can we make this design more compact? Number two, how do we make it so that it's always working and we don't have the occasional build, or I guess the occasional cycle of it just not working? And then I think finally, how do we get it so that every single nodule or every single node that goes through it, how can we make sure that it's always a stack of 4? Well, so I'm sitting here, I'm looking at it, I'm like, okay, well, we have a compressor both on the input and the output side. Then we're using a splitter to take the hydrogen out. Now, that introduces a problem in and of itself, because it's built into the main belt, or I guess the main feeding line. One system is dependent on all the other systems after it. If those systems for whatever reason stop or slow down, then all the previous systems won't be able to function. As you can see right here, that top right build, or I guess refactorizer, I forget what these things are called, isn't working, which is a problem, because if one of them isn't working, there's a good chance more of them aren't working. And it's important to know that for any of you who haven't seen how these machines work, they aren't like assemblers where you put an input, wait a set number of seconds, and you get an output. They are effectively kind of like those ticket machines in an arcade where you put in tickets and it just keeps gobbling them up. Well, they don't have a time to like wait or do their function. They instantly do the function, and they instantly give you an output, whether it's the hydrogen back out or you get the deuterium as the conversion. There's zero downtime from input to output. And because of that, it should be a continuous active state. Well, as you can notice, the build to my right is not all continuously active. So we have to figure out, okay, well, how can we make the build continuously active? Now, through a little bit of research and a bit of ingenuity, this seems to be a pretty go-to way of having this be fairly-ish compacted. Now, compared to our previous design, it's, I would say, better because instead of having the input line also tied to the individual cells of refactorization, they're independently circular, I guess. They're closed loops in and of themselves, which allows for us to not have to worry about any downtime. And so we're just, that one machine that was going was more efficient than probably 3 or 4 in the other build. Now, you probably noticed it stopped. Well, that's because the output side stopped, so the input side can no longer fill up because it can no longer produce deuterium, which, okay, we have to fix. But before we do that, we have to continue expanding the build in such a way that allows us, number one, how can we basically turn it into a cookie cutter build? Number two, how can we get it to be scalable / I guess tileable? Tileable. That's a fun word. That feels like a tongue twister. And other than that, we should be fine. One thing to note, however, the input side, I think the total number of hydrogen we need is about 3 or 4 belts worth. Currently, we only have 1 belt's worth, but that's fine. We'll fix that. I'm also learning to not record these over these post-production commentary late at night, as every other sentence is me yawning, which, in case you're wondering why there's weird pauses in my sentences, that's why. It's because I've muted my mic, yawned, and then continued the thought. Or you probably hear me partially yawn, mute my mic, and then return to whatever the original thought was. That is really one thing I've learned from all of this. A couple of other things I've learned is that this game makes you have a sense of success at an initial build, but then proceeds to take that success and that feeling of accomplishment and destroy it. Because then you immediately find that the way you were doing something is completely inefficient and completely useless. Kind of like programming. You do something one way, it works. You might not be sure why it works, but it works. But then later down the line, you come back to that thing and you go, you know what? This is absolutely garbage. This is a complete dumpster fire of a mess. How could anybody ever possibly design something this idiotic? And then you quickly realize, oh wait, I designed something this completely useless and idiotic. Then you go, you know what? Whatever. It was dog shit when I designed it. It's dog shit now. But now we have this newer version. And the same thing will happen to that newer version at some point. You'll go, you know what? Who could have possibly designed such a heap of garbage? And the cycle continues itself. I feel like that's very true in a game like this, or any game where, sure, there's a good theoretical idea of what the most optimal build is. And to an extent, I suppose you can discover what the most optimal build is. However, I feel like there's always going to be that itch for somebody, not me, because I don't care enough to, but I'm sure somebody somewhere cares enough to try to find the most optimal build for every single system, whether it's making concrete or whether it's making hydrogen or producing graphene or maybe a specific layout for mining, or perhaps it's a belt balancer. I'm trying to think what other some important ones. Just you take any build in their only idea, their only goal is how can I make this more efficient? How can I make this more optimized, right? And I think every game like this has those players. I feel like they're partially the unsung heroes, as you'll find something somewhere at some point when you're playing. For me, I think it was green circuits in Factorial. It's a build that I've used in almost every playthrough for about the last couple years. It holds true in vanilla, it holds true in modded, and there's very few, if any, ways to really improve it. However, I think it's one of those builds that I also see a lot of other members in the community using for when they build green circuits. It's definitely not something I came up with. It's something some stranger somewhere made, and I forgot who I saw it first from. So it's always the second, third, fourth, fifth hand information, or I guess if we want to keep our programming analogies alive, the nth hand away. But I feel like people who come up with the optimized builds for a game are really the unsung heroes. Because it's like, I don't have the patience to come up with that. Personally, I would just slap down a bunch of inserters. If it works, it works. And as long as it produces enough of what I need, I don't care what it looks like. I don't care if it's the most efficient in space. And I certainly don't care if it's most efficient in terms of power. Now, again, there's a lot of people who probably care about those little things. Maybe not necessarily all at once. Like, I mean, I obviously care if I'm using too much power because, I want to make sure that the factory's running and, use as little as possible. But sometimes it's not practical. And now my cat's meowing at the door because he wants in. Fun. Doesn't he know I'm recording? One thing that annoys me is I've noticed sometimes the ore patches disappear. Now, you just saw me go through the terrain modifier to show it back up, but I have had ore resources that were on top of the concrete or foundations and were being mined, and then they just stop being mined and the ore disappears. It's strange. I don't know if I'm going crazy or not with that, because I feel like I've seen it 3 times now where I distinctively remember a part of an ore patch being mined, actively being mined, and then it just stopped because the ore disappeared, and by disappeared I mean goes under the foundation. There's also a couple other errors I've noticed. So for instance, when I blueprinted this design, notice the output doesn't connect to that output belt, which is fine. When it was blueprinted, it wasn't blueprinted with it connected, so I have to manually connect it. However, the belt is connected to the machine. I can visually see that it goes in and is connected to the machine, but as soon as I connect the belt from the machine to the output, the machine and the belt disconnect, and so I have to reconnect them. I don't really know what's going on with that. I don't know if it's a weird, the bots placing it causes the issue, or if it isn't even an issue, if it's just that's how it is, and I'm a complete crackhead thinking that it's not the way it is, but the way I think it works. I don't know. It annoyed me at the time. Words were had, words were said. I was not having it. I was kind of angry that it was doing it. Not enough to kind of decide, you know what, I don't want to play this anymore, but there was a couple moments where I was like, you know what, I'm getting very frustrated with the blueprinting. I've also started to enjoy the fact that parts of the factory are beginning to loop around the planet, and I'm seeing them when I go to one side, because I remember I used to go to one side and be like, the other side of the planet, that build is so far away. Yeah, well, now the builds are kind of going all the way around the planet. I would be interested, though, to see somebody design some sort of like equator base, or I guess not necessarily a base, but some sort of equator build where you do an input on one side and then it just goes all the way around the equator of a planet, and then the output basically is right next to where it started. I feel like it would just be horribly inefficient, but it would look really cool. I mean, it might not look cool, and it might not even be efficient. Or maybe it is really efficient, it just doesn't look cool. I don't know, it was an interesting idea that I had while I was flying around. We are getting pretty close to starting green science again, and finally, I say this every episode, finally getting science going again. It's only been several weeks. Only. But once we get green science going and we can finish off research, then the production should turn online. I really gotta see how close we are, though, and really what builds we have left. I'll probably do that at some point. I'm going to forget. Somebody remind me in the comment section to do that. Figure out how many builds I have left, slash how close we are to the I guess an end, slash getting the Dyson Sphere built again, or I guess started to be built again. I don't know. I know we're getting somewhat close. I'm just not sure how close we are. But see, that little thing. So it shows that it's connected to the machine. I go to connect it from the machine to the or the belt to the other belt. It disconnects, so I have to reconnect it. That little thing, I don't know if it's a bug. I think it's a bug. But it's annoying. It's really, really annoying, and I hate it. This means I have to do twice as many clicks, when in reality, I could have just not copied them and done one click, or I guess 2 clicks. But as it is now, I have to do 4 clicks per machine. Click on the start, click on the end, click on the start, click on the end. Versus click on the machine, click on the output, and call it good, right? So, I don't know. I feel like it added unnecessary work to what I had to do. But who knows? Alright, well, I think that's where we're going to call it. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you guys did, you guys know to smash the like button. If you haven't already, consider subscribing. It helps out the channel. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns for me, you guys know what to do. Leave those down below. And with that, I will see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a good one. Peace out.